Surviving solitary confinement in Pelican Bay. Today, locked away 23 hours a day in a cell the size of a bathroom. No human contact. No sunlight. Just silence and time. For decades, Pelican Bay State Prison has been home to California's most dangerous inmates and its most extreme form of punishment. Solitary confinement. But what's it really like to survive inside the SHU, the Security Housing Unit, today? This is the real story of isolation, rebellion, and survival inside Pelican Bay. The birth of Pelican Bay. Pelican Bay State Prison stands near Crescent City, California, only 13 miles from the Oregon border. Surrounded by redwood forests and coastal fog, it was built in 1989 as California's answer to rising prison violence. At the time, the state's prisons were overflowing with gang activity, assaults, and riots. Officials needed a facility that could isolate and control the most dangerous men, those who could orchestrate violence even from behind bars. The solution was Pelican Bay, a high-tech, maximum security prison with one mission: total control through isolation. The heart of this system is the Security Housing Unit, or SHU, pronounced SHU. Designed to hold up to 1,056 inmates, the SHU became infamous almost immediately. Each cell measures about 8 by 10 feet, made entirely of concrete. The bed, desk, and stool are part of the wall. There are no windows, only a small skylight in the roof that lets in dim light. Inmates are confined for 22 to 23 hours a day, with 1 hour of exercise in a small concrete yard known as the Dog Run. Pelican Bay was built at a time when Supermax prisons were spreading across the United States. The idea was to neutralize violent inmates by cutting them off completely from others. No contact, no communication, no distractions. For prison officials, it was about safety. But for inmates, it became a psychological and physical nightmare. Most of the men sent to the SHU weren't there for single violent acts. They were placed there under the gang validation system. If prison intelligence believed you were a gang member or associate, you could be locked in the SHU indefinitely. Evidence could include tattoos, letters, artwork, or even statements from other inmates. Once labeled, there was no trial, no hearing, just isolation. Inmates describe it as a place where time stops. You eat alone, shower alone, and exercise alone. Conversations with guards are rare and short. The only sounds are the hum of ventilation and the distant echo of doors slamming shut. Days blur into weeks, weeks into years. By the mid-1990s, Pelican Bay had already gained a chilling reputation. Human rights organizations began documenting cases of extreme psychological distress among SHU inmates: hallucinations, paranoia, self-mutilation, and suicide. Some prisoners reported hearing voices or feeling as though the walls were closing in. The United Nations would later classify long-term solitary confinement as a form of torture. One inmate described the experience in an interview. "It's like dying but staying alive. You lose track of time. You start to talk to yourself. The silence gets so loud that it hurts." Over the years, Pelican Bay became the epicenter of California's solitary confinement debate. Activists, journalists, and family members began to expose what was happening inside. Lawsuits were filed. Protests erupted outside the prison gates. But change came slowly, because for decades the SHU wasn't just a punishment. It was the foundation of California's prison control strategy. Still, cracks began to appear in the system. Stories from inside leaked out, of inmates surviving through creativity, communication, and defiance. Men who built mental routines, made chess pieces from bread, or shouted through vents to talk to the next cell. The world was about to learn that even in total isolation, the human spirit finds ways to endure. And in the early 2010s, the inmates of Pelican Bay would do something no one thought possible. They would fight back against solitary confinement itself. The hunger strikes, when the forgotten fought back. By 2011, Pelican Bay's Security Housing Unit, SHU, had become a world unto itself, a grey maze of concrete where more than 1,000 men lived in near total isolation. Many had been in solitary for 10, 15, even 20 years. For most of them, there was no clear way out. The prison system was built around gang validation. If you were accused of being part of a prison gang, like the Mexican Mafia, Aryan Brotherhood, Black Guerrilla Family, or Nuestra Familia, you could be locked in the SHU indefinitely. The only way out was to debrief, meaning you had to provide information about other gang members. But debriefing wasn't simple. It meant snitching, which could make you a target for life. Many inmates refused, not just out of loyalty, but survival. The result was thousands of men trapped in solitary confinement for decades, often for evidence as small as a tattoo or a drawing. By the late 2000s, desperation had turned into defiance. Inmates in the SHU began finding ways to communicate despite the isolation. Through shouted messages, coded letters, and tapping on pipes, they shared a single idea: it's time to fight back. And in July 2011, they did. That summer, more than 6,000 inmates across California joined a hunger strike that began inside Pelican Bay's SHU. The protest was unlike anything the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, CDCR, had seen. It wasn't about food, work, or violence. It was about the right to be treated as human beings. Their demands were clear: end long-term solitary confinement. Abolish the debriefing policy that forced inmates to inform on others to escape isolation. Provide basic human contact, phone calls, family visits, and group recreation. Improve living conditions, more nutritious food, access to educational materials, and fair disciplinary hearings. Outside the prison, word spread quickly. Families of inmates, civil rights groups, and journalists began amplifying their voices. The Center for Constitutional Rights, CCR, and other advocacy organizations joined the movement, calling Pelican Bay's SHU a modern-day dungeon. Inside, the hunger strike pushed men to the edge. Inmates stopped eating for weeks. Some collapsed. Others were hospitalized. Prison officials tried to break the strike with threats, disciplinary write-ups, and medical intervention. But the protest grew stronger. By the end of 2011, more than 30,000 inmates statewide had participated in solidarity. The movement was no longer just about Pelican Bay. It was about the entire system of solitary confinement in America. For the first time, the invisible men of the SHU had forced the public to look at them. Their letters were published in newspapers. Advocates held rallies in Sacramento. Former inmates spoke about the psychological scars of isolation. One letter from an inmate named Todd Ashker, a lead organizer of the hunger strike, became symbolic. He wrote, "We are not monsters. We are human beings. All we ask is to be treated as such. The system is designed to break us, but we have chosen to stand together, even if it means dying in here." The hunger strikes led to a series of negotiations between inmates and state officials. While the CDCR initially dismissed the protests, mounting public pressure and multiple lawsuits forced them to confront the issue. In 2012, officials began making small changes: more recreation time, better food, limited phone calls. But the real breakthrough came in 2013, when a second, larger hunger strike erupted. This time, more than 30,000 inmates across 33 prisons refused meals. It became one of the largest prison protests in U.S. history. The strike lasted 2 months, drawing international attention and condemnation from human rights organizations. Finally, in 2015, after years of litigation and protest, California agreed to settle a landmark lawsuit. Ashker v. Governor of California. The settlement effectively ended indefinite solitary confinement in the state. Inmates could no longer be held in the SHU indefinitely based on gang validation alone. Hundreds of men who had spent decades in isolation were finally released into the general population. Some walked outside for the first time in 20 years. Others struggled to adjust to the noise, the sunlight, even the simple act of talking face to face. But Pelican Bay's legacy wasn't erased overnight. The SHU still exists, though with fewer inmates. And for those who remain, solitary confinement is still a daily battle of willpower and survival. As one former inmate said after his release, "When you've lived in a concrete box for 20 years, freedom doesn't come easy. You have to relearn how to be human again." The hunger strikes at Pelican Bay changed more than prison policy. They changed how the world views isolation itself. What began as whispers through concrete walls became a movement that redefined the limits of endurance, unity, and humanity. Pelican Bay's SHU was designed to break men, but it became the birthplace of resistance. The hunger strikes of 2011 and 2013 didn't just expose the brutality of solitary confinement, they revealed something far greater, that even in the darkest, most silent corners of America's prison system, the human spirit can still fight to be heard. For some, survival meant rebellion. For others, it meant hope. And for all, it meant refusing to disappear.